Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Konstakademien, en judisk kultur i Sverige, Jewish culture in Sweden. My name is Lizzie Shea. I'm very happy to see you here this evening. You know that we just concluded 4 very intensive days at the book fair in Gothenburg when we were guest of honor. And it was really a strong, rewarding, and very meaningful experience to me, myself, and many others. And we're very happy to be able to continue a bit, not to come home and have also an empty feeling on emptiness after all that work that we put there. So we were extremely happy to find out that Dani Shapiro and her husband are coming to Stockholm after the book fair, and that Hila Blum was interested in joining and coming also to Stockholm. And just being able to present these 2 authors, Dani Shapiro from Connecticut and Hila Blum from Jerusalem. They each will speak about her book, and we're very happy to have Almegård, who will moderate the discussion. I think that the discussion will be for about an hour, I would say, something like that, after which we will be happy to have book signing, and please join us also for the reception, take a glass as usual, mingla, and exchange some ideas with Hila, with Dani, and with Mats. Mats, I will let you introduce the books and also the translators of the books. We're very happy for this cooperation with Brombergs Bokförlag and Bazaar Förlag. So I wish you a great evening. Follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. You will see soon all of our programs from the book fair will be on our website. And before I leave the stage, I want to tell you that next week on Tuesday, we have a seminar, very interesting, on Nietzsche and the Jews. So with international guests, so also welcome next week. Thank you very much, and I leave the stage. Have a very nice conversation. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Lizzie. Can you hear me? Or the microphone is on now? Yes. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. And very much welcome to Dani Shapiro and Hila Blum. Did you have a great book fair in Gothenburg?
I think we did. It was many thousands of people who were there for books. What could be better than that? Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. Good. But now we're here for books again, which I love. Dani Shapiro, Signal Fires is your latest, Ledstjärnor in Swedish, published by Brombergs, translated by Manny Kössler. And Hila Blum, you are the author of How to Love Your Daughter, Att älska sin dotter, Bazaar Förlag, translated by Amé Delblanc from Ruth, I don't know how to pronounce that, Achlamas?
Yeah, Ruth Achlamas. And
German, Amé is here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
From the Hebrew original into German and then your Swedish translation,
right.
Yeah, which is beautiful, and so is Manny's. So I was thinking about starting from the beginning with both of you, because you have very strong opening scenes. That goes for both these books. And I might say something about the books to start with as well. It's both books about family and silence in a family and secrets in a family and what that could lead to. And also the relationship between mother and daughter, especially in your case, and father and son, perhaps more significant in your book, Dani, but you also have daughter and mothers, of course, and we're going to talk about that a lot, but I thought we would like to hear an excerpt of the book to start with. So Hila, could you read us the beginning of How to Love Your Daughter?
Excuse me that I'm doing it from because it was a short notice and And so I have it on my phone.
Yeah.
I'll be reading just very few pages. It's the opening pages of the book. The first time I saw my granddaughters, I was standing across the street, didn't dare go any closer. The windows in the suburban neighborhoods of Groningen hang large and low. I was embarrassed by how effortlessly I'd gotten what I'd come for, frightened by how easily they could be gobbled up by my gaze. But I too was exposed. The slightest turn of their heads, and they would have seen me. The girls took no interest in the goings-on outside. They were entirely absorbed in themselves, in their minute concerns. Girls with a kind of light, thin hair that spills between your fingers like flour. They were alone in the living room, too close within my reach. Had I been asked, I would have been at loss to explain my presence. I left. I waited for darkness to fall and lights to flicker on inside houses. This time I ventured closer, hesitating for a moment. Before I crossed the street, I almost tapped on the window pane. I was astonished by the ease with which the family moved about. That was not how I remembered my daughter. I was stunned by the power of her presence. I whispered her name, Leah, Leah. Just to make sense of what I was seeing, I stood there not for long, a few minutes. Leah's daughters, Lotte and Sanne, were sitting at the dimly lit dining room table and yet seemed to be in constant motion, shifting the yellow light to and fro. Her husband, Johan, stood in the kitchen with his back to me, toiling over dinner, while Leah passed between the rooms, crucified by the window frame, disappearing from one room and reappearing in another, bending reality as if she could walk through walls. Even though the living room fireplace was lit, it wrapped the house in warmth, gave it hominess. That's what it was. And there were books everywhere, even in the kitchen. The household looked wholesome. Everything about it meant to evoke the innocence of raw materials, the woodiness of forest trees, the woolliness of clouds. And because I was watching my daughter and her family, without their knowledge, I was vulnerable to witnessing what wasn't mine to witness. I was running the spectator's risk.
Thank you. Let's give her a... So you open the novel with this scene where a grandmother peeks into the house of her daughter, and there are granddaughters there as well. There is a man there. There is something strange because she won't knock on the window, or she won't knock on the door, she won't even enter the house. So we directly feel that there is something odd about this situation. There is something odd about this woman, perhaps. We learn later that her name is Joella. How would you describe her? Who is she?
Well, she's a woman in her 50s, just about, rather relatively recently widowed, about 4 or 5 years before this scene takes place. And a short while before it also, she just found out about the existence of her granddaughters. She did maintain some sort of relationship with her daughter, mainly certain telephone calls, through which Leah, the daughter, led her to believe that she's traveling the world, the Far East, and she did not let her in on the fact that she actually got married and started her own family in the Netherlands. And incidentally, she finds out about it. That is revealed in later on in the book, but she finds out about it, she researches a little bit, and as soon as she finds out where Leah lives and more information of her whereabouts, and she just wants to go there and see it with her own eyes. And she does, but she doesn't knock on the door, so she goes back to Israel and lets Leah believe for another while that she doesn't know.
All right, we're going to get get back to that, but I thought we would also start with your starting scene, Dani.
It's also new territory to read from a Kindle. August 27th, 1985. Sarah and Theo. And it's nothing, really, or might be nothing, or ought to be nothing, as he leans his head forward to press the tip of his cigarette to the car's lighter. It sizzles on contact, a sound particular to its brief moment in history in which cars have lighters and otherwise sensible 15-year-olds choke down Marlboro Reds and drive their mother's Buicks without so much as a learner's permit. There's a girl he wants to impress. Her name is Misty Zimmerman, and if she lives through this night, she will grow up to be a magazine editor, or a high school teacher, or a defense lawyer. She will be a mother of 3, or remain childless. She will die young of ovarian cancer, or live to know her great-grandchildren. But these are only a few possible arcs to a life, a handful of shooting stars in the night sky. Change one thing, and everything changes. A tremor here sets off an earthquake there, a fault line deepens, a wire gets tripped. His foot on the gas. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but that won't stop him. He's all jacked up, just like a 15-year-old boy. He has something to prove, to himself, to Misty, to his sister. It's as if he's following a script written in Braille, his fingers running up across code he doesn't understand. Theo, slow down. That's his sister Sarah from the back seat. Misty's riding shotgun. It was Sarah who tossed him the keys to their mom's car. Sarah, age 17. After this night, she will become unknowable to him. The summer sky is a veil thrown over the moon and stars. The streets are quiet, the good people of Avalon long since tucked in for the night. Their own parents are asleep in their queen-sized bed under the plaid afghan knitted by one of their father's patients. His mom is a deep sleeper, but his dad has been trained by a lifetime as a doctor to bolt awake at the slightest provocation. He is always ready. The teenagers aren't looking for trouble. They're good kids. Everyone would say so. But they're bored. It's the end of summer. School will resume next week. Sarah's going into her senior year, after which she'll be gone. She's a superstar, his sister. Varsity this, honors that, bristling with potential. Theo has 3 years left, and he's barely made a mark. He's a chubby kid whose default is silence and shame. He blushes easily. He can feel his cheeks redden as he holds the lighter and inhales, hears the sizzle, draws smoke deep into his lungs. His father, a pulmonary surgeon, would kill him. Maybe that's why Sarah threw him the keys. Maybe she's trying to help, to get him to act, goddammit, to take a risk. Better to be bad than to be nothing. Misty Zimmerman is just a girl along for the ride. It was Sarah who asked her to come. Sarah doing for Theo what Theo cannot do for himself. Change one thing, and everything changes. The Buick speeds down Poplar Street. Misty stretches and yawns in the passenger seat. Theo turns left, then right. He's getting the hang of this. He flicks the directional, then heads onto the parkway. As they pass the mall, he looks to see if Burger King is still open. "Watch it," Sarah yells. He swerves back into his lane, heart racing. He almost hit the guardrail. He gets off the parkway at the next exit and eases up on the gas. This was maybe a bad idea. He wants to go home. He also wants another cigarette. "Pull over," Sarah says. "I'll drive." Theo looks for a good spot to stop. He has no idea how to park. Sarah's right. This is stupid. "Actually, no, forget it. I shouldn't," she says. They're almost home. It's like a song in his head. Almost home, almost home, almost home. Just a few blocks to go. They pass the Heller's house, the Chertoffs. As he leans forward, the lighter slips through Theo's fingers and drops into his open shirt collar. He lets out a yelp and tries to grab it, which only makes matters worse. He arches his back to shake the burning metal thing loose, but it's wedged between his shorts and his belly. The smell of singed flesh. A perfect shiny half-moon will remain. Years from now, when a lover traces the scar on his stomach and asks how he got it, he will roll away. But now, their futures shoot like gamma rays from the moving car. 3 high school students. What if Sarah had gone out with her friends instead that night? What if Misty had begged off? What if Theo had succumbed to his usual way of being and fixed himself a salami sandwich with lots of mustard and taken it with him to bed? I think I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you. So, Dani, you start with what I learned in school is called in medias res. Straight to the action.
No.
You start with the word and. How come, I wanted to ask, but let me rephrase that. When did you decide that would be an and at the beginning?
I had written about 100 pages of the novel years before, over a decade before, and I had lost my way, and I put it in a drawer. I really felt like I knew these characters, I loved them, I loved their world, but I couldn't wrap my arms around it. And if not for any number of events, including world events that happened, I probably never would have returned to it. And in the early days of the pandemic, I was cleaning up my office closet. I got tired of baking bread. I'm there, I'm cleaning out the closet, and there was this neat stack of manuscript pages sitting there. And I reread them, and my mind sort of exploded because I thought, there's this one section of the book that takes place on one night in the year 2010. There's the next section that takes place on one night on New Year's Eve of 1999. And then the next thought I had was, and now it's 2020. And who have they become? And that enlivened it again for me. But I hadn't written the opening. I knew that something had happened at this oak tree on the property of the Wilf family. I knew it involved the Wilf children, but I didn't know what it was. And so I knew that in order to move forward in the writing, first I needed to really write the opening. And the only thing I knew for sure was that the first word needed to be and. And it was that feeling that I wanted the reader to have, that this was a story that was already, that we're entering a story that has been ongoing. It happened before this moment, it's happened after this moment. And then I tried to create the language that would allow the reader into that feeling of, oh, there's a lot of layers of time at play here.
Mm. Because when I listen to both of you reading the beginnings of your novels, it strikes me that they are pretty different. You have a spectator watching from afar, a family, their life, they're living their life, she stands there watching. And with you, we're in the car, it's total action. But at the same time, I think they're so striking. So, and now you said that you wrote these a decade later, but for me it says that it was as if these were scenes that started the spark, so to speak. Was it like that for you? Was this image of the woman standing outside? No? Okay.
Actually, very much like what Dani was telling.
Good.
Right. Yeah. So, no, not at all. Like my other book, I guess maybe that's my process, I don't know. It's like I knew the sentiment that I wanted to write about. I knew that I wanted to, well, then when I started doing this, my daughter was about 7 or 8, relatively new parent, quite struck by the amount of decision-making that this role involved. From the tiniest to the biggest, and thinking a lot about how, I recognize my intentions to be absolutely good, and my emotions are completely in the favor of my child, and how we might find ourselves at a point in time that I look back and I see something something has turned wrong, has gone wrong, but I won't even be able to trace it or to explain it to myself how exactly it came about that. And so I started, and then I started just so many. I didn't even know how to start tackling it, so I tried so many things, and characters and situations to just. And then after a while, I got to the Ciuela and Leah, and I let them act, and I felt, yeah, I could do another scene with those two, and then another one. And and also, of course, you get to know them while you're doing this. And at a certain point, I understood that it's going towards estrangement, and that's when I wrote the opening scene and placed it in the beginning. And then maybe, I don't know how it is for you, Dani, but for me it was a little bit different, strange, because you know how you make everything up, you're the writer, but then it's somehow like you're also discovering it. It's just like what you said, that you knew the family, you knew the kids, you knew the parents, and you knew something happened. What is it that happened? So for me too, I had to find that, to fill the gap between what I knew about them already and the end result, which takes place in the opening scene, and then I'd write something and say, oh no way, that's not it, so trash it, and then I try again until I found out. Although I made it up, but I also found out about it.
That's the discovery, right? I mean, that's something that I love talking with readers about, because it's so mysterious in a way. There's this way in which that the feeling, it's like this orb in the distance, this glowing that you can sort of see and feel, and that that's right, but what it is, and getting there, and all of the different tributaries before you actually get there, and then when you get there, you absolutely know it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you need to answer to some global truth that would resonate with, like what you're writing would resonate with that whatever global truth, and you would say, yeah, that's genuine. That's probably what happened to your characters. Yes. Then you go on. Mm.
There's also, I was struck when so your daughter was around 7 when you first started playing with this idea, right?
Yeah.
And so that was, both of these novels took each of us a long time in which we were growing and changing.
Absolutely.
And that's always so fascinating to me, is that the Dani who finished that novel was absolutely not the Dani that started that novel. So true. And it wouldn't be the novel if I'm speaking myself in the third person, if that whole arc of time hadn't happened.
Right.
But does that mean that you rewrite a lot? I mean, you said that you wrote 100 pages over a decade ago. Are those pages, can I find them in there, or are they totally different?
Very strange, but you really can. It was like it's like I had one chunk of the marble, and there was really only one character who I had to completely reimagine, which was Sarah, the sister. And she had been a very passive character as she became an adult. And, I wanted these characters. I mean, the book is about the aftermath of this accident. I mean, the accident takes place right at the very beginning, and it's not about the accident, and it's not about the next day. It's about 20 years later and 30 years later, and the decision to not speak, which I think our books have in common, of, the decision to have this be something that is silent. And I realized that I had given Theo a lot of agency. He becomes very successful as an adult, as a chef. And I wanted Sarah to have agency also, because she's a very self-destructive character, and I wanted her to have agency in her own self-destructiveness, not be passive. So I had to rewrite, but really, it really existed, like a hunk of something that was already solid.
All right. So how is it for you, Hila? How long have you been writing?
Dani was really kind, putting us sort of together in our pace, but she's so much quicker than me, and that's so much more. I write a book in a decade, and for me it's really an alternative life in which I can, you know, whatever anxieties or fears or concerns that I have in my life, and I try to do everything right. In the book I let it go and do everything wrong, because you don't really have to pay for it, you know, just your character. So it's so true that as a parent I grew with the book, and there was a lot. It's absolutely not about us, but also it is in the sense that I took every bit of my experience I put through the prism of, you know, of my story. And yeah, I definitely, as a parent, I grew with the book, and the book materialized through my own parenting, although, again, it's completely fiction. And also after my child has read it, finally, at 16, I made sure that she understands that it will remain completely fiction. So, yeah.
Let's hope so.
You know,
no, that's decided.
Yeah, that's decided.
Listening to you, Hila, talk about that, I think the structure of my book worked for me in that sense, because I too had a young child, an 11-year-old, 10-year-old or so, 9, when I was first starting to work on the book, and I was very interested in that age and in the complexity of being that age, and you know how many of us would go back to that age if we could. Like says no one.
What age would we go back to?
Exactly, but middle school has got to be way up in the
yes,
top
yes,
of the
yes,
list.
yes.
And when I returned to, and I created this character, this older doctor, as I thought of him. You know, Benjamin Wolfe, he was, Ben Wilf, he was in his, I don't know, late 50s, early 60s. I thought that was ancient. And when I returned to the book, that was what exploded in my head when I thought, oh, now it's 2020, who are they now? I was able, and my book is also completely not autobiographical, but it's emotionally, when you like writing into your fears, right? Like writing into what could happen to have this go wrong, that kind of feeling. So there's an emotional autobiography or a psychological autobiography, but not a literal one. And so when I returned to it, first of all, I was shocked to realize that I was pretty much approaching the age of the august doctor. I was like, that's not so old. And I had thoughts and things to grapple with about what it would have been like to be a college student coming home during the pandemic, even though there's a very thin layer of the year 2020 in the book, it's there. So it allowed me to grow with it, but also have the part that had been written actually remain, because that was material I don't think that I could have written today. So the file name in my computer for Signal Fires is Magic Novel, because that's really how I thought of it. I thought this will never happen to me again. It tortured me, and then it was like sort of miraculous the way it came together.
All right. Hila, the title of your novel, How to Love Your Daughter, sounds like a bit like a parenting book. Was that deliberate?
Okay, so, no, actually, I chronologicalized two moments in the book, and the title came just for you just a few minutes ago. The title came just in between them. There was this moment just a little bit before I realized the opening scene, that I scrolled, and I really remember this vividly. I scrolled to the top of the page and wrote How to Love Your Daughter. And it's like my subconscious was working in the background all the time, me not realizing it, just trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. And finally it presented me with it. And unlike my first book, whose name I somehow managed to give it, at the very last minute, this was there all the time, and I knew it. And then when I came to the publisher, one of my publishers said, yeah, but it might sound like a little bit like a how-to. And I said, what do you mean? And I said, because, yeah, it's How to Love Your Daughter. I said, but who on earth would think that you would write a book how to love. You can write how to make your your daughter's bat mitzvah less annoying for you, how to spend time with your kid, but how to love your. I mean, who would write that? And he said, "You'll be surprised. People might think." So in Israel, we don't normally write. We don't categorize a book, normally. But this one with my book, if you see it in Hebrew, it says a novel. So, yeah. So just in case anyone, yeah. But
it's a great title. I mean, I didn't.
Thank you.
But, and your title is also great, Dani. Signal Fires. That comes from a poem, right? That you have as an epigraph to the whole novel.
Yes, it's from a poem by Caroline Forché. I did not have a title. I did not have a title. I had a book, a finished book, and I did not have a title. And that has happened to me before, and I tend to turn to poetry when that happens in just desperation. But what happened when I found the Caroline Forché poem was that I was on Twitter. And if I'm on Twitter, it means my day is not going well. You know, it's not a good writing day. There's a popular hashtag on Twitter. I don't know if it's still there. Twitter is not Twitter, but it was #AmWriting that writers use. And every time I would see it, I would laugh and think, no, you're not, and I'm not either. Let's call it what it is. We're on Twitter. But the poet Ilya Kaminsky, who I'm friendly with and who we follow each other on Twitter, and Ilya had posted something like, writers, tell me your favorite works about memory or that deal with memory in an interesting way. And I thought, well, I'm interested in going down that rabbit hole. And I did, and in that rabbit hole was this Caroline Forché poem. And I love her work, and I stopped and I read it, and I just saw the phrase signal fires and also the context in the epigraph, and it was, I knew, it was unmistakable that was going to be the title, and that these characters are all signal fires to each other. And it just worked so beautifully, and I immediately went to Google and looked up to see if there were other books called Signal Fires. And so fantastic that there weren't. Yeah.
Right. I also read your acknowledgement page, where you have the usual suspects like first readers, your loving husband, your editors, etc. But you also have one that strikes me as most important, and that's an author colleague of yours, Jennifer Egan, because she says that chronology is boring. And you thank her for that, more or less, and I suppose that had a huge impact on the way your novel turned out.
That was a conversation that Jennifer Egan and I had when I put the novel in the drawer. I was in despair, and I remember I was driving in my car, and she was on speakerphone, and we were chatting, and I told her that I was trying to tell the story backward in time, which is how it ended up in a drawer, because there's a reason why you don't read novels that are told backward in time almost ever, because eventually the characters aren't alive yet. And when I reached that point, I literally hadn't seen it coming. And then the moment where this major character, Waldo, is born, I thought, uh-oh, I can't keep moving backward in time because there won't be Waldo. And I was explaining this to Jenny, and she said, chronology, she did say chronology is boring, but what she really meant was, if you're upending time, then upend time. Like, why stick with, backward chronology is still chronology. You're creating a set of rules. Why? And I knew she was right, but I didn't know how to do it. So that stayed with me for all those years, and I think that it was a key when I returned to the book. I'd also learned a lot about how to tell storytelling that does jumble up time. In the intervening years, I understood a lot more about how to do that in terms of the craft of it, and I had been working in that vein, so it all kind of cohered for me. Although she's mad at me because her novel after she said that to me was a novel called Manhattan Beach that is nothing if not chronological.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So be careful what you say to another
That's
writer.
almost an historical novel, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. What about you, Hila? Do you also find chronology boring?
Oh, wow. Not per se, you know, it's just kind of...
But you break it up as well in your book. I mean...
So, actually, to be really honest, it's not like I put it... Most of it stayed the way, in the order in which it became aware to me. Or I became aware of it, sorry, in English. So... except for the opening, which I said, and then maybe I've changed, I don't know, 1 or 2 pieces, so I swapped them. What is really difficult for a writer when you do something like this is to feel the accumulating effect of the scenes that you're putting together, because you know all of them all the time and you cannot forget what you know. So I was really anxious to get to the part where my editor reads it and I can ask him a lot of questions and tell him at this point in the book, what were you thinking about this and that? You know, mostly of course he gave me his superb notes, but also most of the sessions between us were me questioning him just to see how it works, how it plays, because I couldn't tell anymore. So this is something that you have to realize about writing something that is not chronological.
Mm-hmm. But Joella, she remembers things with her Meir, is that how you pronounce it?
Meir, yeah.
With her late husband.
Yeah.
At the end of the book, she skips back and forth in her mind, of course, as we all do.
Yeah.
We remember things. We go ahead with what we're busy doing right now. So you have also these shifts in chronology.
Yeah, no, so I'm saying I wrote it unchronologically, and most of it remained unchronological. I mean, the book goes back and forth in time, and back and more forth. But it didn't change much. It created a problem for me to see, to be able to tell how it works. You can have a general idea, but then I wanted to test it, and I really hold always my writing really close to chest and don't let anyone in. So it's like a little bit risky because you work for many years with no one else seeing it, and then you really pray that it'll work, So.
Joella refers to depressions, catatonic episodes, and periods when she has to stay at home because she feels psychologically unwell, which made me start to think about the literary term unreliable narrator. Can we trust her?
Well, first of all, I think we can trust her in the sense that she's not there to lead us on, in any way. And I think the novel advocates the notion that really, through Joella, that none of us are reliable narrators of our life, because every narrative you choose, every way you choose to tell your life is always subjective. No life can be fully chronicled. You cannot tell everything. So by mere choosing what to say, you're already manipulating, the whatever. Your role as the narrator is a manipulation. So, of course, Joella is just like anyone else. She cannot be objective about anything, and no one expects her to. But, so I think we can trust her intention, her goodwill, but we have to take into account that this is just her view of it, and this is what she pulls out, the threads that she pulled out. But I just want to say before that about her mental condition and her struggles, that for me too, I know some readers have seen it, different readers have seen it in different ways, but for me also I was not in any way interested in toxic parenting, abusive parenting, narcissistic parenting. I I don't care about that. I can't relate to it. It's nothing that I could spend years and years writing. I was aiming at what, there's nothing that's really normal, you know, but you can define, but there's a sense that all of us, I assume, pretty much share of what is the normals, you know, the center of parenthood. That's what I was interested in. The same goes for you, Ella. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the problem of the milieu, that, you know, the writer's milieu, but if I look around me, everyone struggles. I mean, it manifests itself in different ways. So Yoella would go into bed for a couple of weeks. Other people would, I don't know, never mind. But I think that she's more or less, you know, within the norm, as I view it when I look around. Also when I look at me and at my life and the way, my struggles. So...
For sure, and I think that's a strength with the book, that because daughter and mother, they're separated, as we talked about, which we all already saw in the opening scene. But there isn't like a point where you know, okay, so this is going to end bad. It's like small steps, and you can't even tell what those steps are in the book, I think. Was that something you deliberately wanted, that it would be a more, I don't know, fleeting thing?
That takes me back to the to what I was saying, what I was looking for. I mean, what I wanted to write about, how every single decision you make may seem at the time, you know, reasonable and reassuring, but then the accumulation of it would turn out all of a sudden turn its flip side on you somehow, and so that was it. And if I succeeded in that, then I'm happy. I'm content.
You know, it strikes me too that Yoella is constantly questioning herself, and that makes for a reliable narrator, not an unreliable narrator, because
right.
she's asking herself, she's trying to understand how this rupture happened, and to me that was one of the most poignant parts of the book, is that that's her narration, that's what she's exploring.
Right. I'm not sure that she's able to give herself, you know, straightforward answers, but she's asking it. Yeah, she's
Right.
looking for it, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
You have a lot of different perspectives in your book, Dani. I mean, every chapter starts with a name. Sometimes it's a family, sometimes there are two persons, but mostly it's just one. Is that a challenge when you're writing, that these voices, these names should be different voices, so to speak?
This was the first novel that I had written that had that kind of more than one voice narration. I've written books in the third person, in the limited third person, where there's one main character and it's in the third person, but we're in that character's consciousness pretty much. We can zoom out a little bit because it's a third person, but mostly we're in. And I've written books in the first person where you can't do that. You can't zoom out. You know, you're very much, your lens is this consciousness. And this novel just really wanted to be written as a kind of community, or as a chorus, and it wasn't difficult for me. It wasn't difficult to distinguish between the voices, or I didn't work at creating the different voices, because they really were so distinct in my mind. I narrated the audiobook. My publisher let me do that. They often don't let novelists do that. I really wanted to, and I found as I was narrating it that I really even spoke, like the cadences of each of these characters' voices were different. One was a little slower, one was a little faster, one had more humor in it. They were all different. But the thing that it allowed me to do that I've never done before was there was this kind of omniscient narrator that holds the whole book together. And that was something I had never done before, and it really wasn't until I finished it, until it went through multiple drafts until it came out in the world, until I started talking about it, that I really thought that omniscient narrator was kind of me. I felt a tremendous amount of compassion for all of those characters. Like, there's one character who readers find quite challenging, who's Waldo's father, Shankman. Yeah. Doesn't have a first name, he's just Shankman. And he's not a good father. And he has a lot of rage toward his son, and he doesn't understand him. This is a very special boy. He's brilliant. He's different. His father doesn't want him to be different because different kids have a harder time in middle school and all of that. And his father's love for him, which is genuine, comes out often as anger. And I didn't try to do that. I didn't want Shankman to be angry at Waldo. I wanted Shankman to be a better dad, but he wasn't. So I would be there and working on a Shankman scene, and I'd be sitting there and thinking, oh, Shankman, don't do that. Do better. You can do better. And it's the strangest feeling as a novelist, as a fiction writer, because you're, of course, the one who can make him do better, but you're really following his lead. And Shankman just could not get out of his own way, and he's the most tragic character in the book, I think. But that was his fate.
Does that happen to you as well? That the characters in the books are struggling against your will, so to speak?
I'm always reminded by Nabokov said that his characters are Gallic slaves, and they just do whatever he tells them to do. But sometimes, yes, they'll take it on their own, life of their own. Yeah, but of course, I always think that it's us, the writers, are also on so many levels. I mean, our subconscious is always there, doing stuff, and I guess it always has to do finally with our subconscious wanting something to be more friction, more, But yeah, but at the face level of it, you might see what is going on here. I mean, come back, man.
Well, it's the discovery we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
We're not puppeteers.
Yeah.
Are you sometimes surprised of what they do as well?
Yeah. I mean, in thinking about this book, some of the characters surprised me. Others were steadier, and I kind of they remained kind of in line with their character, and others, time acted on them, and circumstance acted upon them, and so in that sense that they surprised me.
What about you, Hila?
Yeah. I think I don't want to use any spoilers, but some of I think like Ella took things further than I thought she would. Like, for example, and I said, "Wow, this is rough. Why are you doing that?"
Dani, you mentioned before when we talked about chronology that you had to invent this broken chronology because otherwise Waldo you would have lost him in time, so to speak. And I think one of the scenes in the book that touched me the most, and this isn't a spoiler, I hope, but it's where he's sitting under the oak tree together with Ben Wilf, who is the old doctor of the Wilf family. And Waldo, the boy, has escaped from home, or he's snuck out to watch the stars. And he's with his iPad, and he has this like star app that he can see all the constellations and everything. And they sit there, and actually I get goosebumps just by talking about this scene. That's how much it affected me. It's because I had a grandpa that I used to sit and watch the stars with, so and that was beautiful. But I think Waldo is your favorite character, right?
I love Waldo.
You put so much love and energy and interest into that little boy. How come?
Some of that is unanswerable. Some of that, I think, has to do with being, thinking about what it is to be that age and to be not understood and to be an only child, which I was, to go back to the subconscious, and to not be understood by your parents, in a way to have been born into the wrong family, which it's described. It's described at one point in the book. There's language something like, it's possible to be born into the wrong family at the wrong time, but still to find a way, find a path. And he does the very things that make him so challenged and lonely as a boy are what are his salvation as an adult. And I only got little glimpses of that because I was only going there occasionally. We get to see him, as his life unfolds. And to me, that was so satisfying to write. And I hoped it would be satisfying to read, because that feeling of, as a reader, it might be almost intolerable to be in this very lonely, boy's reality if you have no sense that he's ever going to get out of it. But to have those little windows, just be able to go up and have a glimpse of a future. I mean, don't we all want a crystal ball, at least for a second? So I was trying to create that. And I mean, to me, he's the character that, I mean, I wonder if you feel this way too, Hila. Like I have certain characters over time that I've written. I have one in a very early novel of mine who was at the time, ancient 64-year-old psychoanalyst and Holocaust survivor named Solomon Grossman. I wrote this novel when I was in my early 30s. I mean, what did I know? But Solomon lived on Riverside Drive and around 92nd Street in New York City, in a brownstone, very specific, across from a yeshiva, across from Riverside Park. And every time I'm in my car and I drive down Riverside Drive, I think, that's Solomon's house. I mean, there's ways in which certain characters just become so embedded in our psyches. Has that ever happened to you?
Again, I don't have that much to choose from. Only 2 novels. I have something different happen to me that I've written about in the book. I'm writing about Leah lives in Groningen in the Netherlands, and I adore the Netherlands. But when I try to place it, in the Netherlands, then I knew that it cannot be Amsterdam, because I wanted it to be a place where it would be realistic for an Israeli. We're everywhere. And I wanted to be realistic for an Israeli to go under the radar for so many years. But then I knew it couldn't be like a tiny place, because for certain reasons there needs to be an organized trip that arrives at the... So I looked at the map and I said, okay, well, so Groningen, which I've never been to. But of course, you've been... But I know the Netherlands well, and also had a person that lives in Groningen that I've asked her so many questions about it, for reality check and fact checking, etc., which almost cost me a huge mistake, by the way, which I was able to fix very last minute. I placed the characters taking a tram, because every city I've been to in the Netherlands had a tram. And then only, like 2 minutes before I went down to publishing, then I asked myself, hold on, I never checked that. And sure enough, they used to have it, but so I changed it to a bus. But no, so afterwards, after the book came out, at a certain point I thought we might go there, but then COVID, etc. Only after the book came out, we went to the Netherlands again, and I said this time we're going to Groningen. It's 2 hours each way, but my partner, my daughter, we all decided we're going there. And I said, I want to find the house. I want to see the house, and when I'll see it, I know it. And we got to Groningen, And as soon as we got there, I knew it was a huge mistake. And I said, guys, I'm so sorry. It took 2 hours, but I changed my mind. I don't want to find it. Something, I don't know. So I don't know, but just when you said that about.
So you wanted to stay the Groningen of your
yes,
imagination.
Exactly.
What if the house hadn't been there?
But maybe that was what scared me, at that moment. We might look for it, I might not find it. I just said, forget it, wrong turn, let's go back. So we went and had Chinese downtown.
That's good. But I read the acknowledgement page in your book as well, and I thought you went to Groningen before, actually, because you thank someone in Groningen.
That's my person in Groningen, yeah.
The tram terminator.
Right.
Yeah. But I think what strikes me in your book as well, Hila, is that Leah goes away. She lies to her mother about where she is. But it's, as the title says, it's about loving your daughter and also try to let go of the daughter. And I think that's perhaps where the narrator and main character in your book has most difficulties with the letting go. I mean, when she's drafted to do her military services, Leah, her father says, it's okay, she doesn't have to do it, let her go. And the mother is like stunned about this, what he says. Right. So would you agree with me on that she has a hard time letting her become an adult?
Absolutely. There have been quite a number of book talks and book clubs. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. That I participated in, and I noticed, the first 2, 3, 4, this word would come up over and over again. It's individuation and separation. Which, of course, I immediately understood from the context. Turns out there's always lots of psychologists on board somehow. And they would say, okay, she had a huge problem with her individuation separation. And then I went home and said, what is this? So it turns out that of course, I wrote about it, sensing it, knowing about it, just not knowing it's a thing and that's how it's called, But I knew the sentiment. This is what I was writing about. So it turns out, yes, these are huge things in the psychology of parent-child relationship. How to separate yourself and how to allow your child and yourself, to individuate. And obviously, Joella was not so great about that. And on the other hand, no, there's no other hand, actually. No, she's not so great about that.
Let's stop.
Yeah.
Dani, you run a podcast called Family Secrets. In case you didn't, you could have named your book Family Secrets, I think. But Ben Wilf, one of the main characters, he quotes Carl Jung saying that secrets are a kind of psychological poison. What's your thoughts around that?
How much time do you have?
We have 3 more minutes, actually.
I started that podcast not because I had any interest in starting a podcast. It never occurred to me. I didn't even listen to podcasts. But people have often shared their secrets with me. And I've written a lot about secrets in families and the corrosive power of secrets for many years, for many books. And I found out about 7 years ago that I was the family secret, and that my dad who raised me, my beloved dad, had not been my biological father, and that my parents were very aware of this and raised me never to know it. I was raised in an Orthodox Jewish family, by the way, and I walk through Sweden and everybody's saying, hi, they all think I'm, because I actually am half Swedish and a lot of Western Europe in there. Much longer story than we have time for, but the family secrets came from people starting to tell me, as they knew the subject of the book that I was writing, which was about this discovery, they started telling me their stories, and each story was more fascinating than the next, and not in a kind of prurient, it's not sensational. It's really about what happens when a secret has been kept from you that has formed your whole life without your knowing it. And then you know it, you discover it, you stumble upon it, and what happens to you? And how do you rethink your own history? I think I had broken up with narrative in large part because the narratives that I was constantly trying to piece together about why I was the way that I was and why my parents were the way they were and all of these things, simply they weren't true. I didn't have the correct information. So I started the podcast, and it's now, we're working on the 9th season. So I've been doing it for a while now, and love it. It's a little bit like having another job. I meet with people and talk with them about their stories and get out of my own head.
All right. And what about the Carl Jung part of the question?
Oh, the secrets being psychic poison? Yeah. I do believe that. There's a reason why the language around secrecy that we use is secrets are heavy, they're a burden. We carry them. A guest on my podcast actually said a while back, when you bury a secret, you bury it alive. And I like that even better than the Jung. If I had had that then, maybe I would have given Ben that thought. Because they don't go away. They can be shoved away, and they might stay there for a while. They might even stay there for generations. But they do always come out. And now we're living in a time where it's impossible. When people say to me, and they do all the time, I've kept this secret from my child. So many people have kept this kind of secret from their child. Should I tell them? And I realized that so many people were asking me this question that I had to come up with an answer that was useful and non-judgmental. And so what I say when someone asks me that is, they're going to find out. And then I leave it to them to decide what they want to do about that. But they're going to find out. Do you want to still be here and have that difficult conversation? Or do you want to... both of my parents were gone when I made my discovery, so I never got to have that conversation.
Wow, yeah, it's difficult.
What do you think about that, Hila?
No, all of a sudden I realized what you said, that you couldn't even have any closure of any kind. For me, I must say that I think I turned to I'm on the other end of this, I think, a little bit more secrecy in our family could have, brought some comfort. It's like very Israeli, all out, say everything, truth above all, blah, blah, So sometimes that's difficult too, Balance.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? Suppose we have. Emmy, would you like to start? We have a microphone as well.
This is Hila Blum, who translated Hila Blum's book, actually.
I've just got so curious because as far as I knew, you wrote the book in Hebrew, and now you have this starting in English. Who translated into English? Or did you write it yourself in English?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. It was to me, right? I can't see.
Did you do the translation into English?
English?
Yourself?
Oh, no, not at all.
No, because I remember when we were in Gothenburg, you wrote, and it's always in this book too, it says that the original version is in Hebrew.
The original version is in Hebrew?
Yes,
it's been
and now you have been reading...
Oh, because it's also out in... I was afraid that if I read it in Hebrew, you will not understand, so I read it.
Of course not, but I got just curious, because who translated it?
Oh, Daniela Zamir is my translator to English. And she is, she's fantastic. And
I was just curious.
Yeah, so, and that's the only one of my translations that I can read. And actually, no, because you're translating it from the German, and me not being to read either German or Swedish. So instead of worrying about it, I just said, I think the Swedish is better than the Hebrew, so you should read it. You know, I had to get better with every time.
Is the translator of Dani's book here, Manny Kostler, by any chance? Yeah, Manny, you want to say something? No? Okay. So I guess we're out of time, unless there's somebody who really wants to add something to the discussion. But I think it's better to read the books and also have a discussion with the authors outside as you take a glass of wine. So I thank you all for coming. Thank you, Hila. Thank you, Dani.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank you, Mats, for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Dani.
Thank you so much, Mats.
Wonderful.